Michelle strutted over with bolt cutters in broad daylight, muttering about HOA rules, then clipped the lock clean off my Jeep's gate. What she didn't know, that ugly old truck was part of an active undercover police operation, and her little power trip just triggered a full-blown federal response. It was just another quiet Monday in the neighborhood. Birds were chirping, sprinklers clicked on, and the smell of fresh-cut grass drifted through the air. From the outside, everything seemed peaceful, but inside my house, I was already on high alert. I had just finished reviewing surveillance footage from an undercover sting the night before. I was exhausted, sipping coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Working on the task force meant weird hours and tight deadlines, and the vehicle I used for most of our operations, my black Jeep, parked in the driveway behind a locked gate, rugged, dusty, unremarkable. That's exactly how we wanted it to look. My name's Marcus. I've been with the police department for over 10 years, and for the last 3 I've been part of a special task force. Our job involves surveillance on drug routes, illegal arms shipments, and organized theft rings. Most of our vehicles are disguised, and the Jeep was one of them. Hidden inside it were cameras, tracking tools, and gear the average person wouldn't notice unless they were trained. To a regular neighbor, it might have looked like an old beater taking up space, but to us it was a key part of ongoing investigations. Now, in this neighborhood, we had rules, strict ones. The HOA, or Homeowners Association, had guidelines for everything: where you could park, what color your mailbox should be, how tall your grass could grow. And then there was Michelle. Michelle lived 3 houses down, mid-50s, blonde bob haircut, always wore sandals no matter the weather. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. If someone left their trash bin out too long or forgot to edge their lawn, Michelle would snap a photo and send it to the entire community email list. She called it preserving the neighborhood's image. Most of us just called it exhausting. Michelle had a long-standing issue with my Jeep. Every time she walked her tiny white dog past my house, I'd see her stare at it like it was an eyesore. A few weeks back, she came knocking at my door holding a copy of the HOA handbook. She pointed to a line about non-operational or unsightly vehicles not being permitted in driveways for extended periods. I calmly told her it was fully operational, registered, and legally parked behind my own gate. She didn't like that answer. From that day forward, she started sending emails to the HOA board complaining about my Jeep. She claimed it made the block look unsafe and low-class. One email even said it might attract crime. I didn't respond. I had bigger things to worry about, but I made a note in my work logs about her behavior, just in case it ever came up. Then, one Saturday morning, things took a weird turn. I was drinking coffee on my porch when I saw Michelle snapping photos of my driveway from across the street. When she noticed me, she smiled, waved, and walked off like she hadn't just been spying. That's when I knew she wasn't going to let it go. My Jeep had become her personal battle. Still, I didn't think she'd go as far as she did. The next few days I kept an eye on her, but nothing happened. Until Tuesday. That morning, I was sitting at my computer, reviewing new surveillance requests when I saw the motion alert pop up on my side monitor. My house has cameras installed, nothing fancy, just enough to monitor the yard and driveway. I clicked over to the live feed and there she was, Michelle, standing outside my gate, bolt cutters in hand. At first I thought maybe I was seeing things, but no, there she was, looking left and right like she was checking for traffic, then gripping the handles of the cutters with both hands. Before I could react, snap, she cut the heavy-duty lock right off my gate. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my badge and my phone and ran for the door. As I burst outside, I shouted, "Michelle, what do you think you're doing?" She had one hand on the Jeep's door handle and turned around like I'd just interrupted her taking out the trash. "Oh, Marcus," she said sweetly, "this vehicle violates HOA rules. I've given you plenty of warnings. I'm having it towed." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her again that she had no right to touch anything on my property, and that this vehicle was used for law enforcement purposes. Her eyes narrowed like she didn't believe me or didn't care. "I'm on the board," she said smugly. "I'm allowed to enforce the rules when no one else will." I was furious but stayed calm. "You just cut a lock off a private gate and trespassed on my property," I said. "You have no idea what you've just done." Michelle laughed, shook her head and said, "Oh please, it's just a junk car. I'm doing you a favor." That's when it happened. The silent alert on the Jeep had already gone off. Within 2 minutes, 2 black SUVs rolled up, tires screeching. 4 plainclothes officers jumped out, badges out, weapons holstered but ready. Michelle turned pale. One of the officers shouted, "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where we can see them." Michelle froze, mouth open, eyes wide. She looked at me, then at the officers, then at the bolt cutters still in her hand. "I didn't know." She stammered. I held up my badge. "She just broke a federal lock and tried to tamper with a government vehicle." One of the officers gently but firmly pulled the cutters from her hand. Another began taking statements. Michelle kept repeating that she didn't know and that she was just following HOA protocol, but the damage was done. The Jeep wasn't just any vehicle. It had active surveillance files and protected equipment inside. Michelle had just crossed a very serious line. That's the officers talked to her. I stood back, arms crossed, trying to process what had just happened. Michelle had been annoying before, but this was something else entirely. She had just turned a neighborhood squabble into a federal matter, and the worst part, she still didn't understand how big of a mistake she had made. That was the beginning of something none of us could undo. The day Michelle cut my lock and triggered a full police response didn't end quietly. After the officers calmed the scene and collected her statement, they drove off with stern warnings and a promise to follow up. Michelle wasn't arrested, but she wasn't off the hook either. That bolt cutter she used was being held as evidence, and I could already tell she had no idea how deep a hole she had dug for herself after the SUVs disappeared. Michelle turned toward me, her face flushed with a mix of confusion, anger, and fear. "You could have just told me it was a police vehicle," she snapped. I took a breath, trying to stay professional. "Michelle, I did. More than once. You chose not to listen." She looked away, folding her arms. "It didn't look official." "It's not supposed to," I replied. "That's the point of an undercover unit." She shook her head and muttered something about how ridiculous it all was, then walked away. But I could see the panic in her steps rushed uneven. The queen of the HOA had made her biggest mistake yet. That night, the neighborhood was buzzing. News traveled fast. Someone posted about the SUVs on the neighborhood Facebook group, and within hours, dozens of comments filled the thread. Everyone had a theory: drug bust, sting operation, or maybe a kidnapping. I didn't say anything publicly, but the rumors were getting out of control. By morning, the HOA board had scheduled an emergency meeting. I didn't plan to attend, but by lunchtime, I got a polite message from one of the more level-headed board members, Alan. He asked if I could stop by to clarify what happened. "People are worried," he said, "and honestly, we're not sure how to handle Michelle." I agreed, not because I wanted to stir the pot, but because the truth needed to be laid out. I kept quiet for a long time, and that only made Michelle feel more powerful. Now, it was time to put facts above gossip. The meeting was held at the community center that evening. Folding chairs, stale cookies, and bottled water on plastic tables. The room filled quickly. People whispered as I walked in. Some nodded in greeting, others just stared. Michelle was already seated in the front row, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. She wouldn't even look at me. Alan opened the meeting calmly. "We're here to address what happened yesterday. Several of you saw police vehicles in the neighborhood. There was a misunderstanding involving a resident's private property." Whispers again. Alan looked to me. "Marcus, would you be willing to explain?" I stood up slowly. "Sure," I said. "I'll keep it simple." I didn't go into classified details. I couldn't, but I gave them enough. I told them I worked on a task force with the police department, that my Jeep was equipped for surveillance, and that interfering with it was a serious legal issue. I explained that I'd informed Michelle several times, politely, that the vehicle was part of my job, and I explained how, despite all of that, she broke into my property and tried to tow it. Gasps echoed around the room. Michelle stood up, flustered. "I didn't know it was a police vehicle," she shouted. "I told you," I said evenly. "More than once. You didn't believe me, and more importantly, you didn't care." Another board member, Sandra, spoke up. "Michelle, why did you have bolt cutters? That's not exactly standard HOA enforcement." Michelle looked around, desperate for support. "I was just trying to enforce the rules. Nobody else was doing anything. His Jeep looks like junk." Alan raised his hand. "Michelle, even if that were true, cutting a lock and trespassing is not how we handle things here." People started murmuring again. Some nodded in agreement, others looked shocked that Michelle had gone so far. Then came the kicker. One of the officers who responded had called me earlier that day. He informed me that the department was filing an official report against Michelle, not to arrest her, but to put her on record for tampering with government property. I shared that with the group. The room went silent. "I'm not here to press charges," I said, "but I need everyone to understand what happened wasn't just some neighborly dispute. Michelle didn't just cross a line. She crossed into a federal situation." Michelle sat down slowly, face pale. For the first time since I'd moved into the neighborhood, she looked defeated. After a long pause, Alan cleared his throat. "Thank you, Marcus. We'll take this seriously." The board voted to temporarily suspend Michelle from the HOA. She was asked to step away from any enforcement duties until further notice. I could see from her face that she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just stared at the floor. As the meeting ended, neighbors came up to me, some offering apologies, others just thanking me for explaining. A few even admitted they'd been annoyed by Michelle's behavior for years but never felt brave enough to speak up. That night, as I walked home, everything felt different. The same houses, the same sidewalks, but the power dynamic had shifted. Michelle's grip over the community had cracked, and people were starting to speak for themselves. Back in my living room, I sat on the couch, finally able to relax. The Jeep sat quietly outside, locked and untouched. The cameras were still rolling, but for the first time in a while, I didn't expect any surprises. Michelle had gone too far, and now she was finally facing the consequences. But deep down, I had a feeling this wasn't the last I'd hear from her. For a few days, everything was quiet. It was almost too quiet. Michelle didn't walk past my house anymore. Her little white dog wasn't yapping outside like it used to. No more photos. No more emails. The usual noise that followed her around both literally and metaphorically had vanished. But something about it didn't feel right. It wasn't like Michelle to back down completely. She was the type of person who would rather set the world on fire than admit she was wrong. So, while the silence was welcome, I stayed alert. It didn't take long for the storm to come back on Friday morning. I woke up to find a thick envelope taped to my front door. No return address. Just my name, Marcus T. Jones, written in bold, black marker. I peeled it off carefully and opened it in the kitchen while sipping my coffee. Inside was a letter, 2 pages, typed and signed by Michelle. She had filed a formal complaint against me in the letter. Michelle claimed I had created a hostile environment, intimidated her with military-style police vehicles, and refused to cooperate with the HOA's mission to uphold safety and aesthetics in the community. She ended the letter by accusing me of abuse of power and weaponizing law enforcement to scare neighbors into silence. I nearly choked on my coffee. It was laughable, really. After everything she had done, she was now flipping the narrative, trying to make herself the victim. But Michelle wasn't just complaining. She had sent copies of the letter to the entire HOA board, the city's neighborhood relations department, and even my department's internal affairs office. Now this wasn't just neighborhood drama, it was turning into something bigger. That same afternoon, I got a call from the precinct. My lieutenant, a calm and level-headed guy named Ruiz, asked me to swing by. He didn't sound angry or suspicious, just tired. I knew the department got complaints all the time, but anything involving an undercover vehicle triggered paperwork, questions, and protocol. I showed up around 3 p.m. Ruiz met me in his office and slid the letter across the desk. "Michelle?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yep," I said. "She's turning this into a circus." He nodded slowly. "We've reviewed the footage in your incident report. You did nothing wrong. In fact, you were incredibly patient. But we've still got to file a formal response. Paperwork, you know." I leaned back in my chair. "She's just trying to flip the script. She knows she messed up." Ruiz gave me a half smile. "People like her never think they mess up. They just look for someone else to blame." After the meeting, I filed my official response and submitted all the footage again: body cam, home security footage, and photos from the day of the incident. The department assured me there'd be no issue on their end, but they also reminded me to stay professional, no matter what Michelle did next. That was the hardest part. Later that evening, I attended a block party. It was a casual gap for your folding tables, some barbecue, music, kids riding scooters. It had been planned weeks ago by the neighborhood committee, but now it felt more like a peace rally. I showed up mostly to remind people I wasn't some mysterious figure hiding behind a dark Jeep and a badge. I was just their neighbor. People welcomed me kindly. Some even joked about the Jeep saga, saying it felt like something out of a TV drama. Others approached with more serious concern, saying they'd received copies of Michelle's letter and didn't believe a word of it. Apparently, she had tried calling several residents, asking them to back her up in her complaint, but most refused. And then she arrived. Michelle, dressed in all beige, walked into the party like nothing had happened. She gave tight-lipped smiles, waved at people who didn't wave back, and finally made her way to the dessert table. She avoided me entirely, but I could feel her eyes on me the whole time. About halfway through the evening, she approached a small group I was talking with. I went quiet, as did everyone else. "I just want to say," Michelle began, "that I never meant for any of this to get so out of hand. I was just trying to follow the rules." The others stayed silent. I looked directly at her and said, "You cut a federal law, trespassed on private property, and tried to tow a police surveillance vehicle. That's not following the rules, that's breaking them." Her face stiffened. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "No, Michelle," I said calmly. "You did that the moment you picked up those bolt cutters." The air between us was tense. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue more, but she knew she was outnumbered. Not just by me, but by everyone who had witnessed her tactics for years. This time, no one was siding with her. Without another word, Michelle turned and walked away as the party went on. I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders. People were finally seeing her for what she really was, not a protector of the neighborhood, but someone who used rules to control others. And now her efforts were backfiring. That night, as I stood in my driveway locking the Jeep, I noticed something strange. A small, square envelope wedged into the fence near the gate, too clean to be junk mail, too deliberate to be an accident. Inside was a note, just 5 words, handwritten in block letters. "This isn't over. Watch yourself. Name, no signature." Just those 5 words and a chill that ran through my spine. I scanned the street, quiet, calm, just porch lights glowing and crickets chirping, but I knew what this meant. Michelle wasn't done. She'd lost the public battle, but now, she was going to fight from the shadows, and I wasn't about to let my guard down. I didn't sleep much that night. That note, just 5 chilling words, "This isn't over. Watch yourself," kept replaying in my head. It could have been a prank. It could have been someone trying to scare me, but I knew better. It was Michelle. The handwriting wasn't hers exactly, but the message, that was all her. She didn't need to sign her name. The tone said everything. I'd been in law enforcement long enough to recognize veiled threats. They weren't always shouted or slammed on tables. Sometimes they arrived quietly, handwritten, left in plain sight. That was more dangerous, in a way. It meant whoever sent it had time, confidence, and access. By sunrise, I decided to report it. I drove to the station and handed the note over to Internal Affairs, just to be safe. They bagged it, logged it, and told me they'd have it checked for fingerprints. I also pulled security footage from my driveway cameras. The strange thing, there was a 30-second gap in the feed. The motion sensors didn't trigger, no video, just black, like someone had covered the lens or timed it just right. This wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. This was strategic. Back at home, I double-checked my locks, updated the passwords on my home system, and even changed the position of the security cameras. I wasn't taking any chances. Michelle may have been reckless before, but now she was becoming careful, and that made her far more dangerous. 3 days passed without any major incidents, but the tension was thick in the neighborhood. People walked a little faster past Michelle's house. Kids didn't play near her yard anymore. And me, I kept everything low-key. I didn't want to escalate anything unless I had solid proof. I stuck to my work, quietly tracking suspects on an ongoing case and checking in with Ruiz at the precinct. Then came the morning I found the scratches. It was Saturday. I was planning to drive the Jeep downtown for a quick vehicle check with the department's tech team. When I stepped outside, I saw it. There deep gouges on the passenger side door, not small key marks. These were intentional, angry scratches, like someone had taken a screwdriver or metal rod and dragged it hard, again and again, until the paint peeled away in strips. I clenched my fists. The Jeep was reinforced with hidden gear and tech, but the exterior was just standard issue. It wasn't armored, and now it was damaged, vandalized. Again, I checked the footage, and again, the feed was conveniently blank during the time it must have happened. She was getting better at covering her tracks. I filed another report. This time Ruiz called me directly. "Marcus," he said, "you want us to step in? We've got enough to issue a warning." I hesitated. "I do, but if we make this too official too fast, she'll play the victim again. She's already trying to twist everything." We sighed. "You think she's trying to bait you?" "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe she just wants me to lose it and retaliate." He paused, then said something I won't forget. "People like her aren't afraid of rules, they're afraid of exposure. Keep collecting. Let her dig her own hole." I agreed. I wasn't going to take her bait, but I was going to be ready. That weekend I added hidden trail cameras near my fence line, ones with night vision and backup storage. I also set up a motion sensor alarm inside the Jeep, not the silent one this time. This one would blare loud enough to wake the whole block, and it did. 2 nights later, 2:13 a.m., the alarm screamed into the stillness like a fire truck siren. I bolted out of bed, badge in one hand, flashlight in the other. By the time I made it to the driveway, whoever it was had fled, but the trail camera caught them. Crystal clear. Michelle. She had on a hoodie, but her face was visible when she glanced up at the lens. She was holding something, couldn't see what, but she had clearly tried to open the Jeep's back door again. This time, she didn't succeed. The alarm did its job. I sent the footage directly to Ruiz. Within hours, I received confirmation. The department was issuing a no-contact warning against Michelle. That meant she couldn't come within 100 feet of my property, my vehicle, or me. And if she did, we could press full charges. No more HOA board protection. No more misunderstandings. But Michelle wasn't going down quietly. The very next morning, someone posted a fake news story link in our neighborhood Facebook group. It claimed I was under investigation for misuse of police surveillance tools and harassment of civilian residents. The post had no source, no real link. It was just a screenshot of a fake headline with my name on it. But the damage, instant comments flooded in. Some people saw right through it and called it fake. Others asked if it was true. A few started talking about over-policing and how maybe I was using my badge unfairly. Michelle didn't comment, but she didn't have to. The post spoke loud enough. I called Alan, the HOA board member who had always been reasonable. "You saw the post?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "We already reported it. Half the board knows it's fake." Half. He hesitated. "Well, Michelle's still pushing hard behind the scenes. She's meeting with people, trying to make it look like you're the threat." That's when it hit me. Michelle wasn't just fighting me, she was trying to rewrite the story. Change the ending before it arrived. Turn public opinion, one whisper at a time. But what she didn't realize was this. I already had the ending in motion. I sent Alan the full clip of her caught on camera at 2:13 a.m., hoodie and all. I told him the department would be taking official action soon, and if Michelle kept pushing, I'd go public with everything. He said, "Do it. We're done protecting her." I hung up, looked out the window at the Jeep and smiled for the first time in days. Michelle had set the trap, but I wasn't the one caught in it. She was. By the start of the next week, I knew the end was near. Michelle had pushed too far for too long. What started as a petty neighborhood feud had turned into vandalism. false accusations, and a failed break-in on a police vehicle. She thought she could hide behind her HOA title, behind gossip and whispers, but now the evidence was too strong to ignore. The video footage of her near the Jeep at 2:13 a.m. was already in the hands of the department and the HOA board. I had filed the necessary paperwork, a restraining order hearing was scheduled, and the department had opened a formal investigation into her harassment and threats. If she showed up anywhere near my property again, it would be handcuffed still. Michelle hadn't stopped. 2 days before the hearing, someone slipped anonymous flyers into nearly every mailbox on our street. They were printed in bold letters and filled with wild accusations about me, how I was abusing power, spying on neighbors, and targeting a kind woman who only wanted to protect the community. There was no name on the flyer, but it wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. Neighbors brought the flyers straight to me. Most of them were angry not at me, but at her. "We're done with Michelle," one woman said. "This has gone way beyond HOA stuff. She's embarrassing all of us." That night, Alon, the same board member who had supported me from the beginning, called to let me know Michelle had tried one last desperate move. She'd filed a petition to remove me from the neighborhood, claiming I created a threat to the peaceful environment. It was laughable, but the hearing was the final straw. It was held in a small courtroom at the county courthouse. Nothing dramatic, just a few chairs, a judge in a robe, and a folder with documents thicker than a phone book. I arrived in a clean dress shirt, calm and quiet. Michelle walked in wearing a beige blouse and a smug expression, holding a stack of papers she never even looked at. The judge began with the facts. I had submitted video footage, police reports, written witness statements, and a threatening note. Michelle had submitted mostly complaints, no real evidence, just stories, opinions, and a few blurry photos from months ago. As the judge reviewed everything, Michelle interrupted several times, trying to talk over the process. "He's intimidating me," she said. "He's manipulating the entire neighborhood." At one point, she even accused the police department of covering for me, which earned her a stern warning. Then came the moment that sealed her fate. The judge leaned forward and said, "Ms. Michelle Carter, you were recorded approaching Mr. Jones's government vehicle at 2:13 in the morning. You attempted to open the door. Are you denying that was you?" She went silent. The courtroom was quiet for a long second before she finally muttered, "I was just checking if it was locked." That was it. The judge ruled in my favor. Full restraining order granted. Michelle was legally banned from coming within 100 feet of me, my home, or my vehicle. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. Additionally, the police were filing misdemeanor charges for trespassing, vandalism, and interference with government property. It wasn't jail time yet, but it was going on her record, and it meant court dates, fines, and a serious stain on her reputation. Michelle didn't speak as the judge finished. She grabbed her folder and stormed out of the room, her confidence, her smug smirks, her power all gone. I walked out slowly, the sunlight warming my face. It felt like the weight of the past few weeks had finally lifted, not because I had one, but because I no longer had to stay on guard 24/7. Michelle had played her last card and lost. Back in the neighborhood, things changed quickly. The HOA board held another vote, this time officially removing Michelle from her position. They also rewrote several policies, limiting the power of any single board member to act alone. It was long overdue. People were tired of being ruled by fear and fake rules. Now the neighborhood finally felt like a community. Again, I kept my Jeep parked in the same spot, not out of stubbornness but because I had every right to, and now no one dared to mess with it. The scratches on the side were still visible, but I chose not to fix them right away. They reminded me of the truth that standing your ground, when done the right way, speaks louder than anything else. About a week after the hearing, I was washing the Jeep in my driveway when a little boy from across the street rode his bike up and waved. "Hey, Mr. Jones, is that a real spy truck?" I smiled. "Something like that," he grinned. "It's the coolest car on the street." I laughed. "Thanks, kid. Just don't tell anyone my secrets." Later that night, I stood on the porch, with a cold drink, staring at the quiet block. Porch lights glowed, sprinklers ticked on in the distance, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt normal again. Peaceful. Michelle. She kept to herself after the hearing. Her house was quiet, no more flyers, no more surprise visits. She was still there, but her power was gone, and with it, the fear that had lingered over the neighborhood. As I stepped back inside, I thought about how a simple Jeep, a dusty, plain-looking surveillance vehicle, had nearly torn the block apart. But in the end, it wasn't really about the Jeep. It was about control, truth, and standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes the biggest battles aren't in courtrooms or wars. They happen right outside your door, in the driveway, under porch lights, between neighbors, and sometimes, all it takes to win is refusing to back down. Enjoyed the story? Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Bright Reality. For more jaw-dropping real-life drama, hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode from Bright Reality.